Please join me in welcoming Paul Mandel, Head of Product at Artificial, demonstrating how to close the loop on the AI-driven lab.
Hello. All right, so thanks for the introduction. My name is Paul Mandel. I'm the head of product here at Artificial. As you heard, I'm going to talk about how we revolutionize drug discovery with digital twins and automated workflows. Here we go. So we have a problem in life science today, which is that the experimental data that we're seeing is fractured. We think this is part of what's contributing to the replicability crisis that we're seeing across life science and other science domains. So as you can see here, in a life science lab, you might have a request coming in that is based in a laboratory notebook that a scientist is handwriting. You might have somebody in a lab doing hand pipetting to actually execute the experiment. And then at the end, the results are stored in a USB stick down the hall in a drawer. Obviously, this is very hard to trace, very hard to understand, very hard to see what's going on when something happens and something goes wrong. Might be too far. And what this means is that the data that we're getting back from these labs is non-standard, incomplete, and untraceable. Every lab is producing a different type of data. And whereas something like ChatGPT can ingest text and images from the internet in these incredibly standard formats, there is no such standardized format for life sciences. The data ontologies are incredibly complex and incredibly messy. Artificial standardizes this experimental data and control. So we built a product that takes the end-to-end workflow, takes requests in from the scientists, executes each step of the process on the individual instruments and the people in the lab, and then captures all the experimental results and bundles that into a single combined automation plus informatics data payload. We think AI has great promise in life science to bring us closer to agency over our biology. We've seen an evolution over the last many years of this coming together of the wet lab and the dry lab, bringing together laboratory science, science with living tissue, and simulated science that happens in silico, or through AI, or starting to be more quantum mechanics. And so we need to embrace this convergence if we are, as the scientific director is wondering, going to be able to get to tens of thousands of samples and experiments per week. But ultimately, AI, without some way to get data from a lab or to control that lab, is just a brain in a jar. It can't do anything. It's an intelligence unto itself on its own. But with these standardized payloads, we can get data from all of these different labs, similar science happening on different equipment with different hands, still producing valid, good results, into artificial and ultimately into AI to train much larger, much more interesting, much more complex models that are much more powerful. So we've started pioneering this idea of closed loop discovery along with a number of partners, where we are getting data back from the lab, filtering that data through AI models into artificial, and then using artificial to, as I said, control each step of that experiment with either a scientist or someday a model directly in the loop to control what's happening in the lab and actually run these experiments. So we are trying to be the go-to platform for any biotech company who wants to use AI models in life science, where we can get experimental requests from the scientists, feed those through artificial to produce experimental results by actually executing the task in the lab, produce scientific insights by our integrations with AI, ultimately return those into data records that can be fed back into this loop and create this feedback cycle that is now producing data at a much higher rate than we can now. So we want to be control and data in one single platform. There are a number of different automation tools that exist currently that do one or another of these, but we are one of the few that does both in a single integrated platform and brings all of that data together in one place. So ultimately, we are that vertically integrated platform that unlocks the AI-driven lab. So let's see how this works in practice. I'm going to switch to a different microphone.
I can hear it.
All right, so this is Artificial. This is our cloud-based platform to do closed-loop drug discovery in research labs. So you can see here, each of these is a different lab. So we'll go into this one for next-generation sequencing, which is a pretty common task. And you can see this is kind of all based around our digital twin. The digital twins are incredibly easy to create. We have a very basic drag and drop editor. If you can play The Sims, you can use the digital twin editor to build this. We have an extensive library of equipment, furniture, labware that we can bring in. And this digital twin allows us to understand the status of the experiment that's happening in the lab, as well as reference specific pieces of equipment through what we call our assistants. I'll get to those in a minute. Let's see what it looks like to actually operate an experiment in an artificial lab. So I'll start by creating a job and select this workflow. Workflows are how we define the steps of an experiment in artificial. They're written in Python, so it's incredibly straightforward. Anybody who's taken a basic Python programming course can do it. I do it. I'm a product manager. It's really not bad. These requests come in from the scientists, ultimately. And you can see, so each of these is a request that's been created by a scientist in a LIMS system. These requests have a series of parameters. These parameters are pretty simple, but ultimately the data ontology here is defined in Python using data classes. And so it can be effectively arbitrarily complex. We're science agnostic. So I can batch up these requests if I want to get maximum utilization from my instruments. If I say, have an instrument that takes 5 plates and one request that takes 2 plates and one request that takes 3 plates, I can batch those up. We'll skip that for now. I can do any last minute configuration I need to for the workflows. And then I can go into scheduling. The scheduling view, of course, shows me what experiments are currently running in my lab, as well as the equipment that I have. And I can pick either to run now or at a later time and select the equipment that I want to run on if I have redundant equipment. I can review the details, see if there's any tweaks I want to make, and then run it. So once it starts running, we start generating an indelible data record that keeps track of everything that happened in the job. You can see some of those here. So we can see when the job started. We can see that this was created by the artificial service account, which is what I'm currently logged in on. Under details, you can see these request parameters that we had that came in from the scientist. And this is going to keep track of everything that happens to this experiment or during this experiment. So here you can see one of those assistants I mentioned. Assistants are our integrated digital SOP solution that allows you to build these incredibly rich interactive guides to tell operators exactly what they need to do in the lab. So if I run this, this is going to pull up one of those guides. You can see the list of steps I'm going to have to go through here and the digital twin here for reference. It's just like a recipe. We have the steps here. We have the materials that you're going to need. These materials are, of course, dynamically generated from our Python code. So if you say, hey, we need to run this assistant on 3 plates, it's going to give you, say, 15 milliliters of reagent. If we need to run it on 5 plates, it's going to give you 20 milliliters of reagent to go get. So you can prep it all in advance, be very efficient. When I run this, because we have the digital twin, I can actually reference specific items in the digital twin to make it incredibly clear exactly what needs to happen. We can also bring in photos to reference specific parts. If we want to say, hey, go grab these exact tips. And we can also bring in videos if you need to reference exactly how to do something, or to say, hey, put this exactly here and you have to kind of twiddle this thing like this. It's really easy to capture that in video. Using these assistants, we can also capture data from the operators in real time to understand what they're doing. So you can see here, we can capture a string to represent, say, a lot number from a reagent you're using. So we're actually tracking the exact ingredients that are going into the data. This is really important because if you end in results that look a little funny, it's really useful to be able to go back and correlate that to the specific ingredients that were used, so that if you discover that one of your ingredients was contaminated, say, you can then go track or see every single job or every single piece of results that was generated using that input and isolate it from the rest of your data because you know it's bad or suspect. So let's type in something here. And I'll just kind of click through the rest of this. It's what you've seen so far. These assistants are also incredibly easy to author. It's just a drag and drop editor, kind of like Google Docs. And you can add notes, of course, if you want. So you can see now that I finished it, this step has been captured in the data record. You can see it was me that started and finished it. And if I look, I can see those 2 pieces of data that I captured. So next up, we're actually running a workflow on this integrated work cell. Here we're using Solario, but we're instrument and software agnostic, so we can integrate with any local schedulers or any other standalone instruments that you have in your lab. We love REST APIs. We also have a driver development framework that allows us to bridge from either kind of lower level DLLs or RS-485 serial communication up to a REST API if you need. So we finished that method. While the method was running, you could also see some colors flashing in the lab. Because we have really good API access to a number of different software subsystems, we can actually represent the statuses of the different instruments in the lab in this digital twin. So I can be across the country and see what's happening in the lab, see when something runs into an issue, message somebody on Slack and get them to go into the lab to resolve it. And of course, if they don't know how to, we have these assistants to help walk them through it. So you can see we have this cleanup assistant. This is a very common pattern for us. We have a setup assistant, run some method, cleanup assistant. I'll just mark this complete for now. And you can see the workflow completes. So this was just one simple workflow. But we actually, as I said, capture all the request parameters. And any results, we didn't get any files back from this, but any results would be captured here. And I'll show that in a minute. All of this information from request through all the steps to the result gets captured in our data record. And you can download that as a JSON document that includes all of the timings, all the attributions. I'm sure you can't read it, but there's a lot here. And this gives you this incredibly, incredibly rich, valuable data source to use really however you want. But ultimately, what we typically see is either this goes into debugging to figure out what's going on if something goes wrong, or to feed this into an AI model. So let's see how this works for a more complex job. So I'm coming back to the main screen. I'm going to go look at our cell culture lab. So cell culture, for those who don't know, is a much more complex workflow. It typically involves growing cells over a long period of time. If you've ever grown a sourdough starter, it's very similar to that. It involves every 3 days or so, you have to split the cells, feed them, regrow them, put them back in the incubator to keep growing. You want to take images along the way to make sure that they're still alive. So let's take a look at one of these that's been running for a while. Or here's one that's complete. So here's the full data record for this job. You can see it was created back here. And you can see that loop in this data, right? We incubate for a while, we take those images, run the imaging order, make a refeed order, do that refeeding to feed the cells to keep them growing, and over and over and over and over and over. And each of these steps, again, we can look in and see every detail of what happened at this step. So even if this happened a month ago, all the data is here for you to review if you need to figure out what happened. And as I mentioned, we also capture the results. So every time you do, say, an imaging order and use your imager and generate an image file, we can ingest that file and store it as part of the data record and be able to view it right from within the software. So we also have a very rich API. I showed you the JSON document we downloaded, but if I turn on our fancy developer mode, we can see the entire, or we can see the this incredibly rich API that we have. So using this, let's go and grab the job that I just looked at.
I'd like to take the that's like it. And then color. It's big person and put it down.
And we will
Oh, the door.
get the payload for that job.
There you go.
What? Oh my god, when is it? Right. Not that. Oh, look at me. Huh?
Apparently, he doesn't want to get that one.
I bet you.
Let's look at all the jobs.
No. Oh. It's not. It's hard to reason with. Okay. That.
So here you can see all the jobs for this lab.
It's hard to reason with.
And each of these has a data record associated with it that we can query from this API and go in and look at any kind of timings we want, any kind of reagent mix that happened, any person who came in and touched this, so that if we run into a problem, we always know what happened. So we think that this is a really incredible tool for life science companies to be able to use to drive their API or their AI development. We've actually been working with Moderna to start to set up something like this. Many times we found that the science requires knowledge of what happened during the experiment. You can't just understand the inputs and the outputs in your informatics tool and see and draw your conclusions based on that. You have to see what actually happened. And our data payloads actually let you do that. So we're really proud of this tool. We're very excited for where this is going to go. And that's the demo. I think we got a few minutes for Q&A. Thank you.
Consider like
Yeah, could we possibly?
so it makes the how garden type big go and part in the he's everything that you see.
I think we had a question over here.
Yeah, answer. It's going to matter in going with that.
Yes,
If I'm
Test. Okay. Hi, my name is Jonathan. A little background for me. I'm a PhD student, biomedical engineering, and very in tune with a lot of this. It reminds me of, have you ever heard of Emerald Cloud Lab?
Yep.
Yeah, I love it's very, very well put, but just quick question. Maybe stupid questions, but just to get the discussion going. What's the data licensing policy for publishing or patents? If we use your platform, how does that work? Or do you just have to whatever, as well as is it also FDA audit trail compliant? And then last question is, what types of cells are supported in the cell culture automation part? Is there any I'm sure that's a really vague question, but just in general, I've worked at a pharma company under Gilead, and we use Jurkat cells and Raji cells, which are just a form of cancer. But I'm just curious how it works. Very cool, by the way.
Thanks. Okay, so we got data licensing, compliance, and compatibility. Okay, so data licensing. So obviously we're very sensitive to the fact that data is some of the most valuable thing that pharma companies produce. So we're very we don't keep the data licensing. All the data is uploaded back to the company's S3 bucket or other cloud storage bucket. We can host it if you want, but of course, we know most of the time you want to keep it secure. We do store some information about the timings, and this does run in our cloud, the executor and scheduler and all the services run in our cloud, but all of the results that get produced can be uploaded directly to a customer's cloud. For compliance, we're working on it. We're going through SOC 2 and ISO right now, and the other ones are coming later.
Sorry.
Sorry? Oh, yeah, we think so too. And then for compatibility, so one of the beautiful things about writing the workflows in Python is that we have an incredible amount of flexibility in terms of what we can be compatible with.
Thank you.
So we have a large and growing library of adapters that we have for the different instruments. You can see here some of these are working on Solario. We also integrate with other tools like srun. We can run on standalone instruments like tcan, and we like try to be as flexible as we can in terms of our compatibility.
Are you guys hiring?
Not currently.
Okay, well, keep an eye on you. Look, very well.
All right, thanks.
Then it will head to
How you doing? Eric Conway, Big Bears. I just wanted to ask you what underlying technology you're using for the 3D rendering.
It's all based in Three.js. So the UI that you saw the demo of today is all running in the cloud. So this can be viewed from anywhere, right? We love running this on iPads in the lab for those assistants to help understand what's going on. But this can also be viewed really easily from across the country. And because I get all the state from my digital twin, I can see that these robots are moving in Palo Alto, even if I'm in San Francisco or in Washington, D.C.
I'm the
Hello. Yeah. So I'm curious about the level of compatibility of like connecting to like a data warehouse. So currently some of our lab systems, like our ELN like database is connected to our data warehouse, and they use that to eventually conduct analytics and put them into their dashboards. So I am curious about how this connects to sort of like a pipeline.
Yeah, so we have a number of customers working on that same kind of thing. We have tools to basically, as soon as the job completes, it uploads that complete data record to their cloud so that they can ingest it into their data warehouse or data lake or whatever tool they're using. Because the backend is Python, we also have just really ultimate flexibility in what libraries we install and what we're compatible with. So if there's a Python SDK for whatever tool you're using, it'll work.
see
All right, any more questions?
this all. Yeah. So you go with the house. Let's wait till the lot to get.
Hi, super sad you're not hiring. But I have a security question and a software question. How do you all, with the current clients that you have, balance or share cybersecurity responsibilities, and who on your team, if anyone, performs any like white hat exercises, or is it just all of your clients are kind of expected to do this? I'm sure you've seen a lot of the hacks coming out of. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very sensitive to the security. We obviously understand this data is incredibly sensitive. We handle it in a couple different ways. So first, the second half of your question, we're actually going through a pen test right now. We both do internal testing and external testing to make sure that we're compliant with all security practices and following all the best practices. As I mentioned, for the very secure data, we rely on the customers for that. We say, hey, we don't even want to touch this. We're just going to let you upload this to your secure cloud, handle security in whatever way you see fit, and leave that responsibility to you. For our side of things, we do a couple things. So one is that every customer instance is isolated. So we do single instance per customer so that no customer data is ever in the same database as another customer's data. I think I said that right. And so that at least keeps your data very secure from, say, a competitor's. And then because this is in the cloud and we have a really excellent engineering team behind us, we have folks who are thinking about things like DDoS attacks and other security threats, and again, following best practices to make sure that we're secure. Thanks. All right, I think that's about all the time we have. Thanks very much.